I talk to the battery.
So I don't know if this is on, but, I mean, feel free to ask questions. I didn't see your hand up, but I'd like to suggest after that round that we take like a 15-minute break. There's coffee, new coffee made, and there's food, and then we'll come back. But let's do this first, yeah.
Before you, I just wanted to add one more to the public input question that Skip had asked. We had, is my mic's not working? I'll be loud. I'm loud anyway.
Yeah, but it's about recording.
Oh,
The shotgun mics will pick him up, and I'll go get some more batteries.
Okay.
okay.
You can wait till the break.
We had that issue that he mentioned in our district, where public input wasn't allowed. And if it was allowed, they would allow it in the beginning of the meeting, before any of the agenda items were even discussed. So I would submit, I'm like, how can I weigh in on something if I don't even know what they're gonna talk about? And so, when my friend Ken got elected the year prior to me, he was on an island by himself. It was 4-1 on every vote. And it wasn't until myself and Daniel Popovich-Mueller came and saved him that we finally took the board 3-2. That's where it's at. You gotta take control of the board. You know, you have to have like-minded, you know, responsible, conscientious, you know, common sense people to do the right thing in the board's position. Once we did that, we immediately, and Rich, you alluded to this too. You gotta be careful about opening up the public input. We would open up public input in the beginning, we would have public input at the end. We would also allow for certain public input on each agenda item. But we also reserve the right to stop that public input, because sometimes it just gets out of control. You're there till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, you've got nothing done. And so you gotta be really careful. And that was almost like an agenda line item by agenda line item. A lot of times, it's just one person that just wants to say one thing. Give them that opportunity to make that meeting 5 minutes longer, that's fine. But that was really the chairman's role and responsibility. If he could move that meeting along and he could accomplish both things, letting the public have that input on that agenda item, and we did that successfully for 2 years. And we allowed the public to have their input in peace, they felt good about it, and at the same time, we were able to manage our meetings to the best that we could.
And if I could follow up on that, I mean, we're often criticized for having long meetings. You know, they'll go 5 hours, and we start at 7 o'clock. The problem is sometimes I have 2 hours of public input before we even get to our agenda. And there are school boards, like back to Pembroke, right after Dave Pearl blew the roof off the place, Pembroke, you know, tried to change its policies, and I think they ultimately succeeded, if only because David died, right in the middle of all this. They went for a policy change, which I think is common in a lot of school districts, that limits public comment only to items on the agenda. So if an item isn't on an agenda, you are not allowed to speak. And that is more common than you think. So you need to check your board rules and policies. But in Manchester too, we might be a little different because we have a standing subcommittee structure, and by the Manchester City Charter, every subcommittee and every committee has to have a public comment session at the beginning of the meeting. So if there's an item, a curriculum item, a finance item, a buildings and sites item, you know, an athletics item, people actually get multiple bites at the apple in Manchester. You can talk about it at the subcommittee, you can talk about it at the full board, and so you have multiple places to bring awareness. And that, by the way, reminds me, I left a hanging thread. If you do not have a guaranteed, simple to follow process for your decision making, whether it's subcommittee, full board, or whatnot, you really deprive your community of the opportunity to participate in decision making by offering its input. And that's something I'm a PIA. Don't say English please here. That's something I'm a PIA, pain in the, or PITA. That's something I'm a PITA about. Because you know, if people cannot follow the decision-making process, then you really don't have transparency and you can't hold people accountable. And administrators will take advantage. They'll always, oh, well, it popped up at the last minute. Sorry, don't make a presentation to me unless it's on the agenda. I mean, we've actually had committees pass those rules themselves, saying we're not gonna listen unless you give it to us in advance. So you don't, oh, it was a last-minute urgent thing, prove it. Well, while we were working on the details to the very last minute, fine, give us the rough draft and make sure you have any updates as far in advance as possible. And, you know, sometimes things magically show up on an agenda of the full board that should have made its way through the committee process. And you're like, gee, isn't that funny? Normally, we would have talked about this in finance. Why is it here, Your Honor? Oh, well, it was a time-sensitive matter. Oh, I'll bet it was. So if you do not have a discernible decision-making process that the public can follow, you both do not have transparency and you can't hold people accountable for what they do.
Okay, my question is, some boards are, I don't know if this is across the board, but some boards have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And when you have a sexual harassment or incident with a teacher, and then they do the turkey trot, how do we stop that?
I think it's a great question, and I don't know if I know the answer. How do you stop it? And so we had, I mean, I think that Commissioner Elblue has taken some stabs at this from the state point with some code of conduct legislation that was recently gone in. And where you have the problem is a lot of the kind of circumvents us out of the CBAs, out of your collective bargaining agreements, and they will fight you tooth and nail over that language. When it's common sense. Why would you not want this? But they will, I'm telling you, I've been part of these negotiations. They will not allow it. And I don't know why they won't allow it, but it's something that I think.
Protecting the membership.
Protecting the membership.
At the expense of the kids.
At the expense of the kids.
We don't face that. When you say signing non-disclosures, you guys have non-disclosures?
Well, I don't know what you mean by non-disclosures, Ken.
On the board level or the teachers themselves?
My understanding is it's at the board level.
Ah.
Well, at the board level, I think we have signed some language that basically, we submit ourselves to like background checks, you know, if we're going into the schools, you know, and from a board perspective, from a board member's perspective, I've never had any issue with that. I feel as though if I am gonna enter a school, I'm gonna be around children, by all means, you should have access to my background to make sure that, you know.
For that stuff, but in our case, I've never signed an NDA, I never would. There's RSA.
I don't think I've signed an NDA.
Yeah, well,
No, but as far as from a background, if I'm a criminal or if I'm, you know,
But that's part of when you first get on the board, we have to clear the state police.
Yeah, exactly. So
Well,
I don't have.
but when you're reviewing those kinds of things, that is already in the RSA, that's supposed to be personal, quiet, non-public. But when you have teachers who are doing this turkey trot,
Yes.
not necessarily even within the state, but going to another place where
Yes.
other children are going to be
Problematic.
subjected.
Yeah.
Those would be the personnel laws that bind our hands. That's what needs to be changed. But I think with the new teacher code of conduct, the State Board of Education now has the ability to pull a teacher's certificate for violations of that code. So the state really now is, I think, in a place where it can investigate and take appropriate action so that this doesn't happen. But I will respectfully disagree with my two colleagues here. I've been a Manchester School Board member for 3 years. I've never been through any kind of background check to determine whether or not I'm fit to be in a school, nor do I think there should be.
Well, it's not fitness, it's just a criminal record.
No, and I'll tell you why I think that's a bad idea, okay? Because there are people like Donna Green, for example, falsely accused by a superintendent of our friend Jorge Mesa Tejada, right here, right? For comments he made at a budget committee hearing where he was falsely accused of, you know, threatening the well-being of children in a school, and then you have a superintendent that will, as in Donna Green's case, file false charges against Donna Green and create a criminal incident, whether it's dismissed or whatnot. It becomes a matter of the public record, and there will be school administrators who do not like you because you're disruptive to what they're trying to do, who will create a situation where you will then, as Jorge was, or Donna was, or others, simply be barred from going into a school for any reason whatsoever because you'll be deemed a threat to children. If you have some kind of criminal record or criminal past, that's going to come out for all intent and purpose in a campaign. And if the voters speak and elect you, then you should not be denied access to any building as a school board member. And as a practical matter, you know, I can walk into any school in Manchester whenever I want. And what happens, I have to follow the rules, I have to sign in as a visitor, I have to have a visitor pass, and even though the principals don't have to accompany us, they often will send somebody to be with you, so you're never going to be, quote, unsupervised, and if you are, you're going to be walking into classrooms that have teachers. So the idea that elected officials should submit themselves to some kind of criminal background check to see whether or not they're fit to be in a school or around children gives administrators a tool to block you from a building. And we've seen it happen. And there will be those abuses. So I disagree that you should be subject to that.
I agree with Rich on the abuse part. That actually happened to both myself and Ken. I'll tell you the story. We actually showed up at the middle school, and it was prior to school starting. And we were there specifically to look at a pallet full of MacBooks that weren't being utilized, and we wanted to know why.
I got a school system that'll use them.
And so in doing so, we showed up, and the then principal contacted the then superintendent, and then what proceeded after that was, you know, accusations to both myself and Ken.
And it happened to me in Manchester too with Superintendent Livingston. I
Yeah.
was barred entry to a middle school because I wasn't approved to be there for the reason I went.
And then what I think is notable, Rich, what they also do is they weaponize the council that you have. And be very careful about this, because this happens more frequently than people are willing to admit, is they'll use their own internal counsel. Our counsel was Gordon Graham, and very often you'll actually see him individually testifying on legislation, which I have a problem with. I also seen my former superintendent, Winfried Fetterberg, testifying on legislation during school hours. I also have seen the NHSBA go ahead and testify, which in my opinion should be filed as a lobbying group, because they're taking money. But they're taking money from your municipalities. Stop that. Stop that. And we did. But, you know, with that given into consideration, I submit to that because I know my record's clean. I know that I'm not hiding anything. I know that I am going to be around children, so I, you know, voluntarily say, hey, here's my background. But to Rich's point, you make a very, because I've been on the receiving end of that, and I can understand why they would want to use that and weaponize that against you, because I've seen them weaponize the own internal counsel.
Oh, yeah?
I mean, I would even add to that, with the criminal stuff. I mean, if somebody has a criminal record, but it has nothing to do with the children, first of all, either they paid their dues, and therefore they should be just normal citizens again.
So if you have a DUI,
Yes.
you have a criminal background, you can't go into a school and do your job.
Exactly, and that's just wrong.
That's problematic.
Right.
I would agree.
Maybe now is there.
How are we doing? Great? Everybody?
Dana's got a question.
Dana has a question.
Last question of the session, and then I'm going to put you to death with put you to sleep with an online presentation to give you an idea of how things can look.
My question is for you, Rich. I think earlier you said that you got your district to implement some kind of syllabus for the parents that would list all the instruction. You tried. Oh, I was going to ask you how that went.
Well, no, I'll tell you how it went. It met with huge opposition from the teachers and even from the administration. And the siren song was, well, if we put these syllabi out and the teacher deviates from it, then the teacher's going to be in trouble. And I said, no, that's not the issue. I get that there might be something, a teachable moment that comes up. I get that. I get that there might be a reason why you need to adjust what you're doing. I get that. That's why I'm not looking for it for the whole. I mean, most of us went to college, yes. How many of us, when we went to college, did not get a syllabus of the materials that were going to be used and an approximate timeline of when they were going to be used, right?
Croc TV.